Well, good evening, my dear brothers and sisters in Christ. It is now another edition of Thursday Night Live Bible Studies, and we are covering Galatians chapter 2, verses 11 all the way to 21. And this is one that Lisa requested, and it was an honor to do some research and to dig into this and prep this for a lesson and just be ready. In these lessons and these passages we're going to cover, there may be some nights that we're going to have to end up doing two or three of them because the way I'm gathering the information, like I say, I can do an exegesis on each particular verse, but I think to get the full meaning, there will be a couple verses that will have to overlap one another, which I did last week, which was verse 11 and verse 12. In a way, verse 13 that we're going to cover tonight, I got a little bit more in-depth detail of it. So I didn't want to take 13 into 14, so I kind of want to keep those separate. But it's still basically covering 11 through 14, what's going on and what we went through last week. So tonight will be just one verse, but it's still a continuation of what we discussed last week. And verse 14 will still be kind of a continuation from 11, 12, 13, and 14. So welcome everybody. Good to see y'all again. My wife Sherry. She cooked some beef stew today. So when I get through with this, I'm going to chow down on some beef stew, some mashed potatoes, and a cake afterwards, So I'm gonna have myself a good evening. So if y'all want some food, maybe I can package it and FedEx it to y'all, but y'all gonna have to microwave it when it gets to your house. Hello, Lisa. Hello, the other that's here in the room right now. Uh, if you can leave a comment, we love to hear your comments. But I forgot your chat room name, but I think I know who you are. But again, welcome. I'm glad that you're here on Thursday night, so that's good. As long as you're here, that's wonderful. So with this, whew, folks, you know what? This so far in these particular passages has been a lot of studying going on. It's been a lot of what I call digging, a lot of research, a lot of collecting commentaries and information and backgrounds and facts. And phew, you know what? And I'm trying to blend them all in together to try to get a good little lesson out of it. And so far, I've really been enjoying it because there's a few of the things I think we can relate to in real life. And I think you may understand after tonight's lesson. So with this, we are covering Galatians chapter 2, verses 11 through 21. Starting at verse 11. If you got your Bibles, please read along, but I will post the scriptures on the screen for you to read. But if you want to read along with your Bible, hey, that's fine too, So, verse 11. And now when Peter had come, there it goes. And when Peter had come to Antioch, I withstood him to his face, because he was to be blamed. Woo. For before certain men came to James from James, he would eat with the Gentiles. But when they came, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing those who were of circumcision. Verse 13, and the rest of the Jews also played the hypocrite with him. So that even Barnabas, that's Paul's friend, was carried away with their hypocrisy. But when I saw that they were not straightforward about the truth of the gospel, I said to Peter before them all, if you, being a Jew, live in the manners of the Gentiles and not as the Jews, why do you compel the Gentiles to live as Jews? Well, that's a tough one there, isn't it? We who are Jews by nature and not sinners of the Gentiles, knowing that man is not justified by the works of the law or the works of the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ. Even we have believed in Jesus that we might be justified by faith in Christ and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law, no flesh shall be justified. I mean, a sip of water. Now, to start this off, another interesting facts in the book of Galatians. Did y'all know that words frequently used in Galatians are these? The law, which is used 31 times, flesh, which is used 18 times, spirit, 15 times, faith, 21 times, the promise, 10 times, and the cross, 6 times. So I thought I'd throw that interesting facts to you tonight. So our lesson for tonight is verse 13. Boy, I can't wait to get into this one. Because, I was looking at it this morning and I was adding some more to it. And I got to get to a point I got to stop because, I can keep on and on and on. And I could turn this thing almost into an hour-long session or better. So I'm trying to keep it short, but I'm just trying to kind of get to, well, let's take that beef stew, for example. It's got meat in it. It's got potatoes and corn. So whenever you make a stew, usually we consider the main ingredient the beef. Well, this is what I'm trying to do with this particular passages here. Just trying to stick to the meat of things and not trying to throw all the other ingredients into it, because then it kind of go along and then we kind of go like, so we kind of lose track of what we're really focusing on. So I'm trying to stay focused on the main meat of what this particular passage is going through. So again, verse 13 says, and the rest of the Jews also played the hypocrite with him. And you're going to see where I'm going with this one tonight. So that even Barnabas himself, and that's not in the scriptures, but I'm paraphrasing it, was carried away with their hypocrisy. Now, no, I sure didn't, Lisa. I really, when I first looked at it, oh man, this ain't nothing. I can kind of blow through this in about 2 weeks, but it didn't turn out that way. So, she probably knew how I am. And once I got into it, it's like, Sharon making that beef stew. She had to put all her ingredients in. She made that cake. She had to put all her ingredients in. And she's making some kind of like a whipped cream, lemon whipped cream that goes with the cake and requires all the ingredients. So in the lesson, I couldn't just get the main thing and leave out the rest. So, I'm trying to blend in a little taste of all the ingredients. So this is what I've been doing with this. So yeah, it was a lot for me to get into. So yes, So anyway, in our last lesson, if you can recall it, and those viewers who are watching this to this point, I know some watch this afterwards. I have talking to some recently last week that have told me they are watching this. But in our last lesson in verses 11 and 12, I gave you all the basic insights of what was going on, and we've seen that Paul himself, he had to set the record straight to answer his accusers. You see, Paul was hanging out with the Gentiles, and he was hanging out with the Judaizers, So they, in a sense, started accusing Paul, wait a minute, you're claiming to be an apostle, but yet those apostles are telling us we got to do this, but you're saying, no, we got to do this. Well, dude, then what's the deal is? So Paul was kind of under the gun. So Paul had to set the record straight. So in this passage tonight, and this is why I like about 13, that we see that Paul himself continues. He didn't stop at 11, 12, and then moved on to something else for us readers. Paul himself continues to relate a story about confronting Peter as a way of emphasizing both his legitimate authority and importance of faith, not works, in salvation. So here, Paul was really trying to set the record straight. Paul really had to show those Judaizers, hey, I am an apostle. I do have the authority. I do have the authority to present to you Jesus Christ, but I'm going to show you again, I am legit, but I'm going to show you about the importance of faith and not works as the Jews used to live by. So, he had to cover a lot of ground. He had to set the record straight with them. So, a bit of history in that before we kind of get into the rest of it. We know that Peter, he was at Antioch. He was visiting the Christians there. Antioch itself wasn't like Jerusalem. We know how big Jerusalem is, how important it was, where all the people gathered. Antioch wasn't like that, but it was close. Yes, it was a big town with 4 Jewish people. They had Jews there, but there mainly was a lot of Gentiles there. So, again, there's been a lot of controversy. Some people do preach there's the gospel of Jesus Christ for the Jews, then there's the gospel of Paul for the Gentiles. Well, folks, that's kind of bad teachings. Okay? The gospel of Jesus Christ is all just that. Doesn't matter who wrote it. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, whatever. Everything that we know of in God's words was given to them by the Lord. It is the gospel of Jesus Christ all the way through. The good news. And that's what we call it. We don't preach 2 different gospels. No, that's nonsense. Yes, Paul wrote almost the remainder of the New Testaments, but Paul, if you really dig into it, how he was straightened up, in a way, this is kind of ironic. He's confronting Peter, in a way. Think about this. Tie these 2 in together. He was confronting Peter of his wrongs, and here Paul was doing wrong, killing Christians and everything else, acting like the Jews following the law, and Christ had to knock him off his high horse, blind him, set him straight, and tell him, look, you better stop doing what you're doing because I am the Christ, and I'm fixing to send you on a missionary journey. Kind of ironic, isn't it? You see, I don't know if you ever kind of caught that into these passages here. Again, he's confronting Peter. Well, here, Christ is confronting Paul. Think about that one. Isn't that so ironic? I would say, yeah, but again. So anyway, this is what was going on. So in our last lesson that we learned that Peter had apparently gone along with the local customs. We're talking about the Gentiles now, folks. Keep this in mind. I want to keep us straight. We learned so far right now in these passages, Peter decided, hey, I'm going to go along with the local customs. And he sat down to eat at a table with non-Jewish people. Based on his background, and think about it, Peter was a Jew. I mean, a hardcore Jew. Paul was once before too. But Peter decided to go along with their customs and their backgrounds, and they were non-Jewish people, mainly Gentiles. And based on Peter's background, to him, that was no small thing, folks. It wasn't. We knew, and if you study the life of Peter, and there's some books about him and some of the other apostles, we knew that Peter himself had grown up in a Jewish culture, being faithful to follow the law. And that's how they were all taught back then. They followed the law faithfully. They followed the law and the Jewish customs. They all had the customs. They had the law they had to live by, because basically every Jew that was born and raised up had to adhere to what their parents, the scribes, the Sanhedrins, and the Pharisees, and the way their customs taught them to live. And he had learned early on that is what made him practically a good person. I'm a Jew. I learned the laws. I learned all the customs. So therefore he was good, right? I don't think so, because little did Peter know his life was fixing to be turned upside down. Here comes Jesus. All of a sudden shows up on the scene and tells the rough cut Peter, Kind of sounds like Jimbo a little bit, doesn't it? Anyway, here comes Jesus, sees old Peter, a fisherman, kind of built, kind of rough, he's hardcore. Jesus changed all that because Jesus ended up telling Peter, follow me. Now, here Peter is kind of thinking, well, wait a minute. Now, this dude shows up and he tells me to follow him. He is a Jew, but now he's preaching something different than what he was accustomed to. That's why I said him and all the other apostles and everybody here on out, their lives were turned upside down. But because what he had heard from Jesus, and Jesus talked to him, and Jesus kind of gave a little mini message, and Peter listened. Well, Peter agreed after hearing Jesus that because of Jesus' death and resurrection, and this came after Jesus was put to death on the cross. This is where this is going on because Jesus now has been crucified, so now the time period that we're in, Peter's kind of getting the understanding what Jesus' death and resurrection meant. So he's out there, just like Paul, like the rest of the apostles. He is bringing the good news to the people, but Peter is still kind of hitting on the law. And here's where this confrontation, so to speak, is going on at this particular point, because again, Peter agreed that because of Jesus' death and resurrection, it was not necessary. Here we go, folks. It was not necessary for the Gentiles to live as Jews under the law in order to be saved. And I think y'all kind of know where I'm fixing to go with this, because remember when we said earlier that when the Jew friends showed up, Peter had a different tune, didn't he? He kind of acted differently, didn't he? In fact, that Peter was even told it was not necessary no longer for the Jews to live under the law. Jesus taught him this. But yet, why was Peter acting differently with the Gentiles when the Jews showed up? But see, even though he knew it was not necessary for the Jews to live under the law, it would be hard for the faithful Jews to stop doing so. Because again, you know why? Like I just said, they were all brought up. They were all taught this way. In a sense, they were, I guess you say, trying to find the right words to use. They were accustomed or bred, or I guess bred that way. Sometimes people in churches can be brought up a certain way, can be brought up on traditions, can be taught a certain way by certain people, and they can have passed that on from generation to generation to generation and generation. And they were all taught this way. So Peter was kind of like that, and that's why, again, the Jews was like that. So in a way, it was kind of hard for them hearing the good news, hearing what Jesus did and seeing Jesus put to death, but hearing these apostles preaching Jesus Christ. It was still hard for many to stop following the law. And the reason why I'm going to explain to you why it was hard for Peter to do this. And the reason it was hard, because again, as I just said, they were taught, and here's where it's getting down to the rough part now, the Jews, even Peter himself, they were taught it always been forbidden to eat at a table with the Gentiles. They considered them inferior. We all know about the Samaritans, right? They didn't want to have nothing to do with the Samaritans. They were inferior type people. Well, many of the Gentiles, we're talking about Greeks and other persons, meaning people like us, to the hardcore Jews, we were seen kind of inferior. So it was forbidden for any one of you to associate yourself with that crowd. That's how they were taught, folks. It's always been like that. So now, but like I said earlier, poor Peter, he's here at Antioch, He's hanging out with that crowd. He's eating with them. He's chatting with them. He's talking with them. He's drinking that stuff, laying back and everything else. But now, when a group of men, Peter's buddies, his Jew buddies, who believed it was still wrong to do so, walked in on that meeting. Oh, poor Peter. He was eating with them at the time, freaked out, had like a hissy fit. I bet he was trying to dive under the table or something, or whatever was going on. He hurried and jumped up and boomed away from the Gentile. Peter, get away from me. Oh, y'all didn't see that. Y'all didn't see this. He was hoping they didn't see it. But that's what Peter was thinking when James and all his high-class Jew buddies showed up. And, the way they were taught and the way they were brought up, like, Peter, what in tarnation are you doing? I'm not saying that's what they're thinking, but they probably were. But poor Peter, he was freaking out like a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Whoa, I didn't expect y'all to come here. Whoa. Peter didn't expect that. He didn't expect them to show up. Woo. Now here we see that Peter, this is what I like about this passage. We see Peter was clearly afraid of those men. See, he was afraid, man, what are those dudes going to think of me? What are they going to say about me? What are going to be the things they're going to say? He was afraid they were going to judge him. Whoa, wait a minute, dude. You a Jew? What? And you're eating with these Gentiles? And all these people who knew him, they knew Peter was a leader. They knew he was, in a sense, the head apostle. And now all of a sudden he got busted sitting with Gentiles. Peter's freaking out. He's trying to figure out a way to come up with some cover story, if you want to call it that. I don't know. I wish we could have been sitting there, go back in time and watch exactly the expression on his face. Man, I cannot fathom, what was going on. Boy, with Peter, I believe he was having a meltdown. Oh, man, my Jew friends caught me. Oh, they're going to go run, rat me out to my other Jew buddies. Oh, man, I got to figure out a way to cover this up. I wasn't eating with them. I wasn't eating that unclean pork and everything else. But Peter was afraid. He was afraid. And what was he afraid of, my friends? Basically, because of his fear of what he thought those Jew men were going to think of him, by him jumping up and running away from the Gentile group, ended up leading all the other Jews that were with Peter at the table. Peter just left. He ain't gonna let me be holding his bag. No. So they all got up and left with him. See, Peter, my friends, and look, yes, Lisa even said it, that's gonna probably be another lesson there. Even himself denied Jesus 3 times. Wow. But here, Peter jumps up. He's afraid of James and the rest of the Jew friends, high-class Jews. He gets up. He gets away from that table. It's like, y'all stink. I don't have nothing to do with you. And the rest of the Jew friends that was with Peter ends up doing the same thing. Even poor Barnabas, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Even poor Barnabas, Paul's buddy. Now, here's Barnabas hanging out with Paul. They're going on a missionary journey, spreading news. And all of a sudden, Paul's sitting there. Well, dude, where are you going? I think y'all can relate to. Say you have yourself a dear friend over for dinner. You consider your friend. And then their friend shows up. But all of a sudden, their friends don't like you, so your friend gets up and runs over to the table. How do you think you would feel? I wouldn't like it. How do you think those Gentiles are feeling now? All of a sudden, here we are caught in this mess, and they're thinking to themselves, uh-oh, well, what's going on? I don't get this. Peter's teaching us one thing, but now for some, did we make them mad or something or whatever? I mean, and the rest of the Jews got up and went, and Barnabas himself got up and went, and Paul sitting there at the table with him like, Barnabas, dude, where are you going, man? This was a tense situation. It was. It really was. Because now here's Paul. Man, I don't like this one bit. You know, Peter, I respected you. You were the head apostle of all the other apostles. You lived with Jesus. You walked with Jesus. You talked with Jesus daily for over 3 years. And now all of a sudden you're acting like a hypocrite? No, partner. Something's got to be done about this, and we got to set this record straight. You see, my friends, Peter said that he believed the Gentiles were fully accepted. And here's Peter, here, as I said, made this comment earlier. He was agreeing with Paul. He agreed that the Gentiles, they were fully accepted by God's grace through faith in Jesus Christ. But yet, here we go. We see that he didn't want to get caught up acting like that was true. Because again, he was brought up by the teachings of the law. The Jews were taught this. The Jews were bred that way. The Jews understood this way. Jesus came and preached something else, and they still had a hard time trying to wrap that around their noggin. But yet they were preaching something different to those Gentiles. Y'all are fully accepted by God's grace with faith in Jesus Christ and what he did at the cross. But the Jews were still adding the law to it. And this is finally where these passages, verse 11, all the way up to probably about 15, is where Paul finally had to lay the hammer down. And you know what? We're going to straighten this mess up once and for all before we leave this meeting, before we go to the next village or the next town, because we cannot be preaching two different things. We must be preaching as one. And here Paul, to the Judaizers, claiming he was an apostle, they were looking at Paul. Paul, well, you claiming that you have authority, but these guys have authority too. But these guys are saying something different. They're acting different. They're acting this way. They're acting like we're some sort of a leopard, and you're telling us something different. Now we're confused. But see what happened to Peter? Because this is what's going on. This is what Paul saw in Peter. What happened to Peter when those Jews came in, he showed everyone, not the Jews and the Gentiles. I'm talking about everybody that was in that room. He showed them that in that moment, he cared more about what people thought of him than he did about pleasing God. And therefore, his actions demonstrated a double standard. So what can we learn in all of this tonight? To me, my friends, this is what I want to tell you. Peter showed in that moment, he cared about more what those people were thinking about him than he did about pleasing God. And some of you know me, I preach the truth and I'm not afraid to speak it. There are many people sometimes in church care more about what the pastor thinks of them or what the group of committees think of them or their teams or worship teams or whatever. They care more about that of them more than pleasing God. And many Christians today still act this way. Many of them feel like, you know what, well, I'm not going to go hang out with that group. They're filthy, they're dirty, they smell bad, they're living like poor people. And sometimes many Christians snub their nose up at the lower class. And I think some of y'all can relate and know that y'all know people that do that. I have seen this in churches today. If you're not part of that power group, if you're not part of that committee, if you're not buddy with someone of importance, many of the higher ups that are on those positions snub their nose at you. They look at you like you're nothing. But then some of them play like Peter. Oh, they be buddies with you as long as those committee groups ain't around, as long as the pastor's not around, as long as the worship leader is not around. They play like that to you. They do. And they're your buddy, and they're your friends, and and they're carrying on with you. But the moment the pastor shows up, boom, they take off like a rabbit. And that's being a hypocrite. And we got to stop that. And this is what Paul finally had to say. Enough is enough. I'm fixing to put a stop to it. If we are acting this way, we need to put a stop to it. We need to stop it. The cross of Jesus Christ is for all. Jesus died for all. We don't need to be worried about what people think of us by hanging out with these groups. We need to be worried about pleasing God and helping someone else come to know Jesus. That's what we need to be focused on. That's what Peter was doing. Paul had to confront it, and Paul had to straighten it up. So next week in verse 14, we're going to get to the final end of this semi-cat fight or dog fight, however you want to call it. But we're going to get to the bottom of this where finally Peter was convicted by what Paul did. And his eyes opened and said, you know what a sinner I've been. I shouldn't have been acting like that. Remember what I said last week? Sometimes when we see a brother and sister kind of acting like that we in a loving way sometimes have to confront them. And sometimes when we do, I hate to say this, sometimes when you do kind of confront those people, they get mad at you, upset, or they try to get you in trouble. And us pastors, sometimes when we do that, sometimes we get evicted, thrown out. Pastor, we don't want you no more. It happens. But there are other times you say, look, I love you. I need to let you know something. What you're doing is not quite right. I'm not doing this in spite, but I'm trying to help you understand how we need to present the gospel. And most do accept that. They do accept correction. Those are the ones with teachable spirits. And this is what Paul was doing to Peter in these passages so far. He had nothing against Peter. He loved Peter. But Peter, you got to stop playing both sides of the fence, my man. You need to start doing what I'm fixing to do. I'm fixing to go out and present the gospel to all. And that's what the gospel was meant for. Apparently, you didn't get it when Jesus was trying to teach you, but I'm fixing to show you this is what the gospel means to everybody, Jews and Gentiles, for all of us. Remember that. I hope you got something out of this. I know I did. Tune in next week. Same bat channel, same bat time. Verse 14, we're going to come to the conclusion of this semi-cat fight. Amen. God bless y'all, folks. I'm fixing to go chow down on some beef stew. I hope y'all ate or fixing to eat. Hope you have a great night. Remember, Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, coffee and scriptures. If not, tell your friends about it. If not, have them watch the videos later. And be sure to do something for me. Start sharing these videos. Share them on your timeline. Share them to other people. They may need to hear something in one of these. Let's spread the word. Let's start doing our part. God bless you. Have a great night. Go in peace.